Welcome to the Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show. I am your host, Albert Apache, and as usual, we are brought to you by Open Source Self-Defense, Fitness, and Grappling. All right, guys, so Red Pill alert right off the bat. We're going to be talking about an extremely sensitive subject, and that subject is suicide. And in particular, we're going to be talking about male suicide. And basically, I picked up a newspaper the other day, last week, and there was an article on basically a spike in teenage suicides here in the Mesa, Gilbert, East Valley area of Phoenix. And it talked about the title, or the headline was Grieving East Valley Moms Talk of Their Son's Suicides. Of course, they go through and, it progresses, and little by little, it does say that, the majority of the suicides were young men. This really isn't that surprising to me, given that, among suicide victims, 75% are male. And, we tend to sweep that statistic under the rug. And I want to first set out and say that I am not any kind of, trained therapist or trained psychiatrist type of person. I have no psychiatric background other than what the books that I have read. So, I don't have a degree, basically, is what I'm saying. What I'm speaking on is my basic opinion of what I see. So, first and foremost, one of the biggest problems I see that challenges these young men, and I think that, it starts with young men, is that all of the paradigms for which we look at emotional intelligence, or that we tend to give emotion, are always from almost a feminine archetype, right? For instance, we want, when we talk to men, it's always about how they need to express themselves when it comes to depression, when it comes to dealing with issues, when having emotional problems. However, when we talk about them expressing themselves, it seems as if we want to hold them to what is like a feminine standard. We don't realize that, as men, they might have a different way of articulating their emotions. As a matter of fact, I feel this very, very strongly. And so a couple of weeks ago, on Facebook, I was scrolling around, and it was a question of, why is it that men don't feel like, or that they don't want to share their emotions with women or with their spouses or something to that effect? And what I articulated in the column was, or in the feedback, was that, a big portion of it is because I don't feel like I have to justify the way that I feel, or the way that I deal with things, or what my emotions are. And sure enough, somebody shot back and with a condescending attitude of, excuse us for trying to connect. Well, there you have it. Like, I don't need you to try to connect with me, okay? When I want to talk, I will talk. And if I don't feel like talking, I shouldn't be shamed for that either, okay? I mean, here is the reality. The reality is that we've taken away the dangerous spaces for boys, which is one of the ways that men and boys express themselves, okay? Creatively, okay? Thinking through, logically, rationale. And there's nothing wrong with it, okay? There's nothing wrong with the way that men process their emotions. Men like to storytell. Men like to take on a project, immerse themselves in what they're doing in order to deal with what it is that's troubling them. Work can be a very, very therapeutic thing, very cathartic. Many times I tell people that I love jujitsu and I've fallen in love with jujitsu because it is extremely therapeutic for me. And what I mean by that is that I have to be very present in the moment when I'm rolling jujitsu. It stops my mind from racing. And what this does, the effect that it has overall, is it puts me in a somewhat meditative state. Also, it's a competitive environment. It's a thinking man's game or sport, if you will. And it's physical, so it's connecting my mind, it's connecting my body, it's making me focus and gets me into a very, very meditative type state. And through that, all of a sudden, clarity comes. And there's nothing wrong with this. Now, I wish they would have included it in the Red Pill movie documentary by KCJ. If you haven't checked out that documentary, I really suggest you check it out. It's a great documentary. Really, I mean, I think it hits the nail on the head on what is going on and what is wrong with our gender relations today. But that being said, there was a portion, an outtake, something that wasn't put into the main movie, and it was a man that was talking about how men communicate their feelings, and he talked about how men are very different and they approach things differently. And in Australia, they have what they call the man sheds, which is kind of like a man cave, but a bit different. It's not a place to necessarily relax. It's a place to get away. And these man sheds are basically exclusively for men. And they have tools, literal tools. And men can go there and connect with other men. And they can start a project and build a project. And what men do is, through their work, that is when they choose to talk or not to talk. Many times, the project will have some significance in what they're feeling, or it will connect them in some way to tell a story about a time when the person maybe that they're grieving for or the issue that's bothering them was not an issue. And see, this is how men are much, much different, okay? So I first and foremost, or excuse me, not first and foremost, so I'm already pretty deep into this, but I want people to understand I love my daughters. I absolutely love my daughters. I have 3 of them. That being said, it's alarming to me that it's a vast majority of men that are taking their own lives. And so I don't mean to dismiss ladies or women or girls that are suicidal or that, make that horrible choice of ending their life. I'm not trying to say that that does not matter to me. I'm trying to say that I feel that we are ignoring a huge problem with men who are ending their own lives, and particularly that it's trickling down now into our boys, into our teenagers. And it needs to be addressed. Beyond that, beyond the paradigm having to shift in how we expect people to communicate or emote, okay, allowing males to be masculine in the way that they approach their emotions is something that I feel needs to change. And not only that, but I mentioned it at the beginning, and it's the dangerous spaces. Okay? These young boys are having a hard time finding purpose. They're having a hard time finding direction in life. And part of the reason why is because, in my opinion, what I've seen in the last 20 years or so, maybe, and probably even before that, that's what I've seen or witnessed with my eyes. But if you look at the history books, for probably the last 40 years, 50 years, we have, as a society, been extremely focused on our rights. Our rights to do this and our rights to do that. And nobody wants to talk about responsibility. Nobody wants to talk about what are you responsible for and how do you find purpose. And see, responsibility and purpose are tied together extremely tightly. And no, responsibility is not obligation. Those are two different things. Obligation is something that other people put on you. They make you obligated to do something. Okay? A responsibility is a choice. You choose to be responsible for something. And when you choose to be responsible for something, you find purpose. This is why, you see men such as Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Jocko Willink. You see these guys gaining huge followings because they talk about creating a purpose, taking responsibility, and taking a drive to accomplish something. And so young men are drawn to that because it's a message that we're not preaching enough. It's a message that young men in particular need because there's such a vacuum for it. Again, I'm not an expert in psychology. I'm simply giving my observations and my opinions of what I've seen. And I really think it's time for a resurgence in dangerous spaces for young men and boys. And when I say dangerous spaces, I don't necessarily mean a fight club, okay? But I do mean spaces where they are in danger of failing, where they are in danger of being humbled, where they are in danger of losing, where they are in danger of having their ideas questioned, their feelings hurt, so that way they can grow, because that's how growth is achieved. All right, guys. So this entire show is going to be really, really red-pilled. I hope everybody's holding on to their britches because it's going to be a ride. I think this is a topic that we'll have to come back to. We could do a whole hour back and forth on this. But the biggest thing I would really challenge people, mothers and fathers, to ask, okay, is if you're a mother and father of a boy, are you putting them in dangerous spaces? Are you giving them the opportunity to fail? Because it is an opportunity. Are you putting them in a position that they can grow? Are you allowing them to feel proud of themselves? Okay? There's a lot more to uncover here. We'll get into it another time. But for now, I think we need to transition to something else. But it is along the same lines with the whole male and female kind of dynamic. So let's go ahead and transition to this. Okay. Red pill alert once again. Another red pill alert here. This is some contrarian thinking. This is probably going to ruffle some feathers. But here it is. We're going to talk a little bit about the story that broke last week with Patriots owner Robert Kraft. Oh gosh, mothership is trying to beam me up here. Robert Kraft being implicated in a prostitution sting, some kind of human trafficking investigation, something of that sort. So, first and foremost, let's get the shocking part out of this, because this is the approach I want to have this conversation. To paraphrase George Carlin, I don't understand why prostitution is illegal. Selling is legal. Sex is legal. Why is selling sex illegal? Now, let's just be real honest. The biggest thing that people bring up and the big concern and the big argument always is human trafficking and basically sexual slavery. I mean, I think everybody can pretty much agree that that's the danger. Now, that being said, you have plenty of women that participate in prostitution completely willing. You have an entire industry based around it in the state of Nevada. So why is it that we have this kind of moral sense that we're not supposed to sell sex? And let's think about just how pragmatic this is really for somebody like Mr. Kraft. I mean, his wife died a few years back. I think he's 77 years old, if I remember correctly. I mean, what sense does it make for him to basically stake half of his billions or billions of dollars into a relationship simply to have sexual gratification so that he could be involved in a long-term monogamous relationship? I mean, what sense does that make? It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, I think, they said in the story with some of the graphic details that he was there all of 15 to 20 minutes, something of that effect. So what's the problem? And here's what I think the problem is. The problem is not the act itself. It's that it sheds a light on the elephant in the room, which is that there's a huge portion, not all, don't misquote me, I'm saying a huge portion of relationships, romantic relationships, especially in the male-female dynamic type relationship, in which basically the male is looked at as a utility and used for resources, and the woman is used basically for sex, and she is a quote-unquote trophy or trophy wife. And this is why we see older gentlemen many times with younger women. But for some reason, when we basically lay it out and it's all just out there for us to see in its glory and all of its graphic, no lies, no filter, it makes us uncomfortable. And why is that? Why does that make us uncomfortable? I really don't understand it. And I think it has to do with the fact that there are some in society that want to continue to perpetuate this myth that somehow, girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice, and, boys are, frog guts and puppy dog tails and blah, blah, blah. So, girls are clean and boys are dirty. And so it's almost like we expect these things out of men, but we don't expect them out of women. And that's our problem. Or actually, we don't say it's our problem. We actually make it everybody else's problem. So I really find that, this is a bit of one of those stories where, if these women were human trafficked here and, they're being held against their will, of course, that's a travesty. Of course, that's a horrible thing. That being said, let's just be honest about why there's even a market for this, for the human trafficking portion. The reason why there's a market, a black market for prostitution. And that's because there's too many people who want to pretend like this is not a paradigm that many people live their life by. And that is basically trading resources for access to sex. The only difference between prostitution and a lot of couples that we see in day-to-day life is that everybody's being real upfront and honest about it in a prostitution situation. and everybody knows exactly what's being exchanged. If you haven't watched some documentaries on women who enjoy or actually wanted to be prostitutes, you probably should. It's very, very enlightening. And now let's go ahead and switch on to yet another red pill topic. This one has to do a little bit with the NBA, or I should say, an ex NBA player. All right, guys. So this red pill moment is about Mike Bibby, high school basketball coach, also ex NBA player. And basically, he was a basketball coach for, I believe it is Shadow Mountain High School here in the Phoenix metro area. Apparently, he's been accused of sexual abuse on another teacher, okay, on a female teacher, not on a student. Apparently, at first, they were going to allow him to continue to coach, but just ask him not to have contact with the teacher. Now they've apparently also suspended him or asked him to step down as the coach until the investigation is wrapped up. Apparently, it was about 2 weeks ago that this accusation came to light. The interesting part about this, what makes this a red pill kind of issue, is the accusation just came about 2 weeks ago. However, the incident was back 2 years ago in February of 2017. So it seems extremely dubious that they're going to be able to prove these accusations credible or non-credible given the amount of time that's passed. Now, apparently, part of the story is that there was two members of the staff besides Bibby and the woman in question that witnessed the incident. And apparently the story thus far is that it must have been one of those two, or maybe even somebody who heard it through hearsay who reported. If it's a hearsay accusation, I am super questioning whether or not you're going to be able to prove anything. If it was one of the other two individuals, the reason why this becomes very red pill is it seems super convenient that 2 years later, all of a sudden it's an issue. What I also have issue with is the fact that this allegation came in 2 weeks ago before the state championship game was played, in which Bibby coached the team to yet another state championship. Now it seems very, very convenient that now it's serious enough to release him as coach now that the championship is already won. So herein is why this is very red pill to me. It's red pill because it raises a lot of questions about, statutes of limitations. How do you disprove or prove something that's over 2 years old in which there's no real physical evidence? You might have witness corroboration, but at this point you have to seriously ask, why didn't they come forward? Like, what is going on? This is a bigger, deeper issue. Regardless if he is guilty or not guilty. See, the problem is that we take these smoke screens of, oh, it's a bad man, and let's vilify the bad man who creates or, engages in sexual assault. Okay, but what about, why wasn't this reported 2 years ago? So I'm really, on the fence. I don't know what to think here. There are all kinds of red flags going on. There's all kinds of smoke. The problem is that there's smoke all over the place. There's smoke over here in this spot. There's smoke coming from this spot. So where's the real fire? And I just feel like it is become so indicative of the climate these days, which is a man's livelihood is on the line. And actually, it's not his livelihood because he's a volunteer coach. But in this case, his reputation is on the line, but nobody seems to really care because, well, there's this accusation, and it's so serious of an accusation. We just have to let him go, and it's okay if we smear his name. I mean, you know, it's just, it's frustrating. I mean, we talked a little bit last week about Reuben Foster. I think it was last week or the week before. Now apparently the charges are dropped on him again, yet you don't see the big media frenzy to come and give you that story and tell you how, once again, the person who was proven to be a false accuser had dropped the charges and dropped the charges again and dropped the charges again, and now once again has dropped the charges after his career was put on hold yet again. So it's just extremely frustrating for me as a man, as somebody who looks at the world through a different lens, through, a contrarian lens. It's super frustrating to me. So anyhow, let's move on, guys. So we're going to shift to this. UFC 235 coming up this weekend. We're going to talk about the most interesting matchups. We're going to start with the most interesting matchup to me. So let's get into it. Red pill moment. Once again, it's not the main event that is the most interesting to me. So the most interesting fight of the night to me is Jeremy Stephens versus Zabit Magomedshirapov. So also known as just Zabit. This is probably the most interesting fight of the night for me because it's going to tell us a lot about Zabit. It's going to be his first real test of the upper echelon of fighters. Stephens has been in title contention before. Really, he's kind of become a gatekeeper. Let's see. Some of the guys that he's lost to that, would have some similar kind of techniques or styles would be Frankie Edgar, Moicano. He most recently lost to Jose Aldo, which those people really have really good striking, very technical with their striking, really good fighters that can move around. Now, Stephens has a lot of power in his hand, and he can, hit hard. So he can finish the fight. But other than that, I really don't think he has a chance at winning the fight. The only way I think Stephens wins this fight is if he makes it into an ugly, dirty fight where it turns into a brawl. That being said, that's why this has become a test. We're going to know really quick if Zabit is the future of that division, right? If he's the future of the 145-pound division. Now, we're going to see exactly how he is developing. If he is very crisp, very patient, picks his shots from the outside, or he takes Stephens down, grinds him out, then we know he's a smart fighter, he's developing well. If he gets baited into a back and forth, a give one, take one kind of fight, then we know that most likely as he enters the top 10, he's going to have more problems. So it's like the most interesting fight of the night for me because I'm a big fan of Zabit. I really like his style. I'm really hoping it translates because I really love watching him fight. I just love the way he fights. Very technical, has the striking, has a ground game, is super fun to watch. Hopefully his power, continues to develop. He's had 4 fights in the UFC. I believe he's had 3 finishes. Of those 4 fights, he's only had 1 go to decision. So I believe Zabit is the real deal. And I just love his look. One of my friends likes to say he kind of looks like a wino. Like a wino they just pulled up off the street and threw him in there to fight. And the way that he fights, it kind of gives that impression like he's very nonchalant, like he looks so relaxed in there, like there's no care in the world. I'm just here to fight. I'm just going to throw my punches. I'm just going to look for my takedowns when I need them and the submissions when I get them. So that's probably the most interesting fight of the night for me, and I think for the UFC as a company, as a business going forward. Do they have basically somebody, some goose now that will continue to lay some golden eggs for them in Zabit? All right, so let's move on to the next fight, guys. So the next most interesting fight on the card in my mind is the Ben Askren versus Robbie Lawler fight. Again, this is a super interesting fight because it's going to tell us a lot about Ben Askren and him competing at this level. Now, Ben Askren has been much talk in MMA circles. If you are not familiar with Ben Askren, then you're probably a casual. But he is a very, very dominant wrestler. Okay, he has very, very good offensive chain wrestling. So the question is here, the person he's facing is Robbie Lawler. Now, Robbie Lawler used to not have very good takedown defense, but in the past few years, he's really developed that to the point where he's had some really great wins against wrestling-based fighters by stopping the takedown and punishing guys for trying to take him down. Robbie Lawler has not fought in about a year, just over a year, I believe, but that's the same for Ben Askren. So we're not getting some kind of weird matchup where we're not getting to actually see these guys at their best. We're really going to, or where we're getting some kind of weird matchup where one guy's had a ridiculously long layoff and the other guy's like peaking. Both of these guys have been out for about the same amount of time, haven't fought for about the same amount of time. So I think we're getting, as far as athletically concerned, as far as whether or not they're on an upswing or downswing, we're getting a really clean matchup here. This is going to tell us a lot about whether or not Ben Askren belongs in the UFC. He's dominated in other fight organizations. That being said, it's widely accepted that other fight organizations are not on the same level athlete-wise as the UFC. Or if they are, it's only like their very top guy in each division that belongs or could compete at the UFC level. Robbie Lawler, I believe, is ranked number 6 in the world right now. He has a style which can give Askren problems. The question here is Ben Askren is the wrestling coach for Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley has knocked out Robbie Lawler. Has Tyron Woodley given some kind of game plan, helped with some kind of formula with Ben Askren for him to pull out something that maybe we haven't seen from him? Is he going to maybe fake a shot and come over the top in a Eagle Nurmagomedov kind of style, right? Is he going to do something like that with the Eagle Punch or something, some knockoff version of the Eagle Punch? Maybe they'll call it the Funky Punch. If you didn't know, Ben Askren's nickname is Funky. So maybe something like that. Or is his chain wrestling just going to overwhelm Robbie Lawler? Chain wrestling, although, we have a lot of high-level wrestlers in the UFC, the chain wrestling is not something we see often. We see guys shoot maybe one shot, going for a blast double, trying to get the single, but not really transitioning from a stuffed takedown very well. What chain wrestling is of course switching as one avenue is stuffed, switching immediately to another avenue of takedown. Switching off from the single to the double, maybe doing a snap down, trying to weave through, looking for a trip, looking to come to the back, looking to drag you down from behind. All those type of things all blended in together. Going from one leg single, going to the double, switching over to the other side, making it into a really, really pretty amalgamation of takedown shots or takedown attempts. So I don't know what we're going to see here, but it's really, really fascinating to me because it will tell us pretty quickly, this fight will tell us whether or not we've been held out on as UFC fans, as MMA fans, that Dana White for so long denied Ben Askren to be in the UFC, or if Ben was absolutely right and he's belonged here the entire time. I also would like to see maybe Ben comes with a little bit more fury And if he gets Robbie to the ground, if he can keep him down, to dish out a little bit more vicious punishment than he generally does. Usually they're just pitter-patters and he's kind of winning on points. He just kind of steals rounds out from underneath opponents. Let's see if he can bring it and really make it look ugly. That's what I want to see from Ben Askren. Hopefully we'll get it. Okay, so switching from Ben Askren to his athlete whom he coaches, Tyron Woodley. All right, so this fight is pretty interesting, not just because it's a title fight, but because of the matchup. Usman, I believe, is the first fighter that Woodley has faced that is going to have the power in his striking as well as the danger of a takedown to really challenge Woodley. I don't think that Thompson brought a takedown fear for Woodley. I think he allowed Woodley to fight in a certain comfort zone because he was kind of one-dimensional. It was going to be a striking match, and that's pretty much it coming from Thompson. When he defended against Damian Maia, I believe Damian Maia pretty much was also semi-one-dimensional. Pretty much everybody knew he wanted to get the fight onto the ground. His boxing was a pitter-patter style that was meant to distract more to get to the takedowns than it was to really hurt Woodley. So I think it still allowed Woodley to have a one kind of track mind. And then against Darren Till, well, I was rooting for Darren Till, and I thought he had a shot. He only had that shot so long as he kept it on the feet, and so long as he fought his fight. Woodley got him to chase. Woodley came over with that big right hand, knocked him down, got him to the ground, fight over. So let's see if Usman can escape the same fate. So the next most interesting fight is Cody No Love Garbrandt versus Pedro Munoz. So this is an interesting fight because Pedro's number 9, climbing his way up the ranks. Cody's number 2. It's a top 10 fight. And while we've seen Cody get knocked out, this is going to give us a real answer if psychologically he's back in the game, if TJ just happened to have, his number on those nights. He just happened to be stylistically a tough matchup for Cody. And can Cody rebound? So is Cody really number 2 in the world? We're really going to see that. I think it's super interesting because it makes the 135-pound division interesting for us to watch and to see what's going to happen. I think Cody should win this fight. He has better movement. He has better boxing. The only problem he has is that when he stands still, when he gets into exchanges, he tends to start letting his punches get wide. If he does that against Pedro, he could get knocked out. Now, the least interesting fight on this card, unfortunately, is the main event. Now, I know it holds interest because anytime Jon Jones fight, people want to see Jon Jones because he's a spectacular fighter. I'm not a Jon Jones fan in the sense that, I guess I'm his anti-fan, you could say. I don't like him. I'm not a fan of his. I hope that, Anthony Smith beats him. That being said, I respect the skills that Jon Jones brings into the octagon. The reality is that in just about every single category, Jon Jones should have the edge in this fight, and it's very, very lopsided. Even Las Vegas has it extremely lopsided. So, with all of that being said, it makes for a fight that I don't think should be very interesting if Jon Jones is able to fight his fight. Even if he's not able to fight his fight the entire fight, he should still win this fight. And that's why I don't find it extremely compelling. The only way this fight becomes compelling is if Anthony Smith is able to shock the world. And in that case, it's very much reminiscent of the Holly Holm Ronda Rousey, where it's only going to seem interesting after the fact. Now, do I believe Anthony Smith has a shot to win this fight? Yes, he has a very small window to win this fight. And how he wins this fight is by making it a little bit more ugly. He's got to depend on his durability, his tough chin to get on the inside, get inside the pocket, get to the clinch, and try to do damage there. Basically, taking strikes and taking damage to inflict damage. If he can do that, it makes for a very interesting fight and puts Jon Jones in a position we've never seen him before, which could be really, really fun. So I hope, for the fans' sake, as well as Anthony Smith's sake, that he's able to get Jon Jones to get into his world and play his game. Because if this is Jon Jones's game and it's an outside game, and then an explosion to a blast double or something to that effect, it's all day Jon Jones and an extremely boring fight. But that's what we got, guys. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. This has been the Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show. Keep in mind, if you want a more technical breakdown, go check out the Weasel MMA. Okay, he does a great technical breakdown. Until next time, guys, remember, be practical, be purposeful, get fit with a purpose.